everyone. Welcome to the Stony Island Arts Bank. My name is Julie. I'm the Director of Public Programming for Rebuild Foundation. I have a couple of housekeeping notes before we get started. The washrooms are going to be this direction, through this hall here. The bar is obviously this direction. I see a lot of y'all have champagne to celebrate Frankie's 65th birthday. I would just ask you to please be mindful of your glassware. We'll be coming through to pick it up during the course of the talk. So today is a very special day. Yesterday was Frankie Knuckles' 65th birthday. As many of you likely know, we do have Frankie's vinyl collection here at the Arts Bank. You can see some of the images of the records projected here. With support from the Donnelly Foundation and, of course, the Frankie Knuckles Foundation, we've been digitizing the Frankie collection for the past year. We've digitized about 30% of the collection so far, including most of the acetates, test pressings, lots of the rare cuts. So we're really excited because today is really the first time you're going to hear a lot of that newly digitized material following the talk during Duane's set.
All right.
So to kick off, this day really kicks off a full year of programming for us, highlighting and celebrating the contributions of Black queer folks and really thinking about the role that spaces play in Black queer culture and what these sanctuary spaces really mean. Rebuild Foundation received support from the 2018 Red Auction to really do a year of programming around this topic and also, really highlight that the HIV/AIDS epidemic is continuing in these communities. So our Friends Center on Halstead are here today. They are doing free testing and providing resources. So if anyone wants to get tested, you can do that following the talk right here in the North Gallery, and you're welcome to go and talk to them and hear about their materials and contributions. If you haven't signed up to our newsletter, I encourage you to do that. Again, we have a full year of programming around this topic, really centered around the Frankie collection. Duane is a huge part of that, but we're going to have additional partners, About Face Theater, Avery R. Young, Chicago Dance Makers Forum, really through the whole year. So I encourage you to sign up for our newsletter where we send all of that information. And then finally, as you know, following this great talk, we are going to have a dance party. So I'll ask you, yes. So I will ask you all to move to the lounge after the talk, get yourselves a drink. We're going to clear these chairs, reset the space so we can all dance. Thank you all so much. It's my pleasure to introduce you.
Hi, y'all.
All right.
So I am always nervous when I talk in front of people, so forgive me. Also, I've had a little bit of a cold, so I'm dealing with an itch and whatever. So I got tea, water, all that. Anyway, enough about it. You're here to hear about Frankie in the warehouse, obviously. If anyone here ever gone to the warehouse? Woo! Wow, I'm jealous.
Yes.
Because clearly I was not old enough. So there's a lot of things that we in the house community always combating people's history when they talk about places they've been. There's a lot of that. I was there. Of course, I was not. But nevertheless, I'm excited and happy that I have mentors like Robert Williams, like Greg Cannon, like Dana Powell, like Freddie Dunson from the Frankie Knuckles Foundation, and so many that I've sat at their feet and learned so much about the history, because I came into the party scene in 1983. So that was some years after. I think at that point we had moved on to the Powell plant. Nevertheless, too, I also had, all of my uncles were DJs in the 70s. So I had a bit of a head start because I had family members and older siblings who were already in the thick of things. When I was able to first actually party that young, is because my mom trusted me. She knew I was raised socially in the music culture. She knew I would go out and act like I had some sense. So she wasn't as fearful. The only time that she ever got fearful and would enforce me to have curfews like that is when my little sister got AIDS and decided she wanted to go. Of course, the rules are different for your baby girl. To which used to always piss me off because I'm like, why do you want to go? I'm trying to do my thing. Anyway, so I've been on the house scene since '83. I started in '85 doing what we call now street promotion. Back then it was DJs like Lil Lewis and Ferris Thomas would grab us to go from high school to pass out their flyers. And of course, we didn't get paid. Our payment was just the prestige. We got to bypass the line and walk in the club while everybody else was lined up down the block. So we looked important, even though there was no money involved. But anyway, music has been my life, though, my whole life. Like I said, my uncles and everybody were DJs in the 70s. My mom had so many musical friends. The Emotions used to have car parties at our house all the time. Inglewood. The Staple Singers used to go to our church. And just so many things. So I really grew up in Chicago's soul music, history, and things of that nature. So a lot of things just kind of stuck with me, stayed with me, and everything like that. So here it is, 2020, and I find myself talking about music.
All right.
So my mom said this is what I was born to do. So anyway, I want to get to what we're here to talk about. So about 2 years ago, I was called to do a talk about the collection and related to Tamir Rice. You guys are familiar with Tamir Rice and the whole situation with the kid that got killed in Cleveland. If you didn't know, that gazebo that's out there on the lawn is the actual gazebo that he was killed in. The Ashley stepped in. The city of Cleveland was going to demolish the gazebo. Tamir Rice's mom wanted the gazebo to be resurrected to be a sacred space of healing and reflection. So somehow the Ashley got involved and was able to get it here because the city of Cleveland was going to demolish it. So when I was asked to give this talk, and as it relates to Tamir Rice's gazebo, I'm like, how am I going to talk about Frankie Knuckles and house music in the warehouse, and how I'm going to relate it to Tamir Rice? Right? And the gazebo, like, what's the correlation here? So I want to start off with this piece that I found by Dr. Wallace Best that kind of will give you an idea of where I'm headed with this talk, okay? So this article he wrote, it was in the Huffington Post, and it was an article that was written after the death of Michael Brown. And the article, if you want to look it up for the Huffington Post, is called The Fear of Black Bodies in Motion. I'm not going to read the whole thing, though. So it's talking about another situation where somebody by the name of Lamar Jones got stopped for an illegal seatbelt violation. And it details when he got pulled over. So the officer's name is Sean Grouper. And I'm going to start off reading where it says, Grouper screams, "Can I see your license, please?" When Jones reaches back into the vehicle to comply, Grouper screams, "Get out of the car, get out of the car," and simultaneously begins firing. 4 shots. Jones's wallet can be seen flying as he is pushed out of sight of the camera, falling to the ground, struck in the hip. Off camera, he can be heard groaning and asking, "What did I do, sir? Why did you shoot me?" Although this case has received far less attention than the Eric Garner and Michael Brown cases, likely because Jones survived, it is no less significant. I think Jones's question, "Why did you shoot me?" is one of the most important ones to emerge in the aftermath of the Garner and Brown killings. It gets at the core issue of every instance in this spate of shootings and killings of black people in the last several weeks. And I would argue for a much longer time than that. Grouper's response to Jones was, "Well, you dove head first back into the car." The answer is rooted in a deeper history that transcends that encounter. Why did Grouper shoot Jones? Because he moved. And historically, black bodies in motion in this country has spelled danger to the white power structures. Grouper later explained that he felt his life was in danger, same as the other cops did the other shootings, because he was certain that Jones dove back into the car, saw something black in his hands. The reality of the situation can be found when he amended that response to simply say, he saw something black, and it was moving. As a scholar of the Great Migration, I have spent most of my career trying to understand the multiple meanings of black bodies in motion. If I've ever learned anything from any of my explorations, it is that black bodies in motion is never without consequence. That line is what actually struck me with this whole thing. Black bodies in motion is never without consequence. The irrational fear of black bodies is deeply ingrained in our national psyche and has at times received the full support of most structures of our society, including our religious institutions. During the slave era, for example, the threat of insurrection prompted a series of oppressive restrictions on black assembly and black movement for slaves and free blacks. Some churches either fully embraced or turned a blind eye to Jim Crow discrimination, terrified at the prospect of interracial worship. Anti-loitering laws in the country were steeped in racial bias, with the overt implication that a group of black men congregating with no purpose constituted a gang. The legacy of this is that there is no such thing as a singular black body. Patricia Williams called this masked multiples, where one is many, two is a mob, and all are a threat. Okay, I'm going to leave it there, because that goes a lot. But keep in mind, black bodies in motion never without consequence. Keep in mind, multiple of others where one is many, two is a mob, and three are a threat. So you guys know that last year was the 40th anniversary of the disco demolition that took place right in Chicago, correct? I was actually amazed how many people didn't realize that took place here. But okay, is anyone in that room not familiar with the disco demolition? Wow, okay. All right. So, the disco demolition was an event that took place July 12, 1979 at Comiskey Park, which is White Sox Park on 35th Street, right off the Dan Ryan. It was a ceremony that was staged by a radio jock by the name of Steve Dahl, whom gathered an army of people to create a ceremony to blow up disco records because they hated disco music so much. And the promotion was come to the park. It was for the Loop radio station, and it was bring a record to the park, get in for 99 cents, and then between the double header, they had a tank come out and blow this bin of records up. And the ceremony actually is what really killed disco music in popular culture. And the disco demolition was so much more than just we hate disco music. It was because they didn't like the lifestyle that was associated with disco, which was a music and a culture that was championed and created by black and brown and LGBT people. So I actually have a picture that I wish I could have shown. I could actually show my iPad around if anyone wants to see it. So I found this picture of the actual bin of the records that when people brought their records to Comiskey Park to be blown up, and they're supposed to be disco records. But I look at the very top of this picture, and I see Gladys Knight album with Midnight Train to Georgia. Is that a disco record? I don't think so. And Vince Lawrence, who is considered to be one of the pioneers of house music, he was actually a person working. He was usher and a person at the gate working the Comiskey Park. He said when he would take records, that it was mostly just black records. It wasn't disco at all. It was just black records. Middle America had had enough of this culture. We're coming on the other side of the civil rights era. We're coming on the other side of so many things. And they felt like, much as Trump supporters do now, that these new this culture was being shoved down their throat. And that was actually the words they used, right? So I brought that up to bring up the climate of what was going on in the city. That was 1979. Leading up to that, right? Again, we're coming on the backside of the civil rights movement, we're coming on the backside of so many things. And even though Illinois was the first state to decriminalize the act of homosexuality, it still had a segregation problem. Of course, you know that Comiskey Park sits on the backside of Bridgeport, which was known historically for not being a friendly place to people of color. So because I always wanted to know, like, how could something like this, Chicago seemed to be so liberal, how could something like this take place here? But yeah, we had a segregation problem. And so even still on the nightlife scene, like one of the most popular most popular clubs in Chicago was a club called Duane's Bistro, which was considered to be the Studio 54 of Chicago, even though it opened before Studio 54. Duane's Bistro. And it was on Hubbard and Dearborn, is where it was. And it was to attract celebrities and things of that nature, but it had what was called a black quota, where only so many could come throughout the night. And that was one of the things that sparked Robert Williams to start doing the events that he started doing. Situations was, again, where they were down at the bistro in line trying to get in. And again, because they were there in a number of, I want to say, Craig told me they were in a group of number of 8 people. And they were not allowed entry because, again, like I said, in that quote, 1 is too many, and basically 8 was a mob, so they were not allowed entry. So in response to that, in response to having all these different venues in Chicago, these popular discos, denying them entry, or when they get entry, being discriminated against whenever they went in, to the point where Duane's Bistros had several lawsuits of discrimination against them. And then another club, it then won, with Ron Harding's explained that. It had like threats of arson, all kind of things for this. So most of the people, Craig Cannon being one of them, was one of my mentors. Anybody, you know Craig Cannon?
Yes.
So Craig Cannon, a lot of people don't know his name, but Craig Cannon was one of the key people that led Robert Williams even moving to Chicago. They were fraternity brothers, and they started to throw parties at their apartments and their houses in South Shore. And these parties became notorious. Did anybody ever go to any of those parties?
Yes.
Oh, wow. So you know all about it.
Yes.
So these parties were membership only. And I guess you went because you knew somebody.
Yes.
Okay. Because you had to know someone to get in these parties.
Yes.
And they were at these different locations within their houses in South Shore. And these parties grew bigger and bigger. And they grew a membership list. And when they looked and saw the zip codes for majority of the people who were coming, the zip code overwhelmingly was 60649, which means all of them lived in South Shore.
Yes.
Anyway, these parties got so big that they could no longer house them. And so Robert Williams, moving here from New York, he didn't move here with the intent on being a promoter, being a club owner, anything. He had family here, and they told him he could find work. But Robert was a juvenile counselor in New York, and he had a mind for structure. Anyway, I invited Robert to be here, but he couldn't be here just to keep knowing he is around and living. But I'm telling the story for him. But anyway, so they began to find other spaces to throw these parties in. As they found bigger spaces, these parties got bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. It was like they told 2 friends, and they told 2 friends, and they told 2 friends, and so on and so on. She's one of them.
Yes.
So anyway, one of the first locations they found actually was across the street from a fire station on Michigan Avenue. And the fire station didn't like it because they were packing them in. And at that time, there wasn't really any kind of real fire codes put in place for things of that nature. And then it was to the point that the party would get so jumping and so hot that the windows would steam, and they would open the windows and let the steam out. And the fire department actually believed that a fire was happening. So because of this, the fire department drew up something and got them put out. And then they moved to 555 West Adams. And just moved around. At one space they moved into actually caught on fire. The music equipment that they rented actually burned in the fire. Just all of this. And at this point, when Robert was actually at his wits' end from dealing with all this and the fire and trying to get sued by the company, his lawyer Siegfried found a space on 206 South Jefferson that became Studios, which y'all call the Warehouse. And it's quiet as kept, like it's always saying, they always say 1977 because that's the year Frankie got here, but it was actually opened in 1975. And the first party was actually a fundraiser for the Democratic candidate, Adlai Stevenson. Yes. And that's the crazy part was how they actually was open and actually sustained is because they had support from the Democratic Party. And that's interesting because we're talking Father David, right? But that was the reason why there was never any police accident shutdowns because they had the bagging of the Democratic Party's units. And at the time, Craig Cannon, who I mentioned, he was the first DJ in the Warehouse. She remembers all of them. I need to have her come up here and do the talk. But eventually Craig left and went down to the Ritz too, which eventually became the space for the music box. And Robert needed another DJ. And so he decided to go back to New York. He wanted T. Scott. T. Scott wasn't going. Robert had this thing where he moved to Chicago. His view was based on the people he hung with. And his view was based on the segregated minds of the people he hung with. So if you only navigated in certain spaces, it led you to believe that this is all that was happening, right? So there's a narrative that's always been out there being told. Every time I see like stories about the house culture, they make it seem like there was no culture or anything happening before he got here and opened the Warehouse, and that's not true at all. Of course, you know, we want to talk about the early 70s. This is the year that gave us Minnie Riperton and Maurice White. There was a vibrant music culture happening in the city, and there was definitely other clubs, but the Warehouse was the place that created a new movement, is what was happening. So anyway, he had been painting Chicago as being very country, and here we are, country city, is our Mississippi roots. And so he wanted T. Scott. T. Scott turned him down. And he approached Frankie because Frankie was actually Robert was his juvenile counselor. Frankie used to be in Trouble King in New York. And Robert was his juvenile counselor. And he convinced him to move to Chicago after telling him that, you know, I have a space for you. And Frankie was hesitant. And then he kind of told him that Larry Levan is the man that's coming up in New York. And as long as you stay in New York, you'll always be number two to Larry. Move to Chicago, and you can create your own thing. Boy, was he right. Because they moved to Chicago, and that's why we are here now, right? I want to play some songs that were out of Frankie's collection. I have a group of records here. We intended this talk to actually be upstairs in the space with the collection. But when we saw the number of people who was trying to come, we was like, yeah, they don't fit this room. So I tried to pull a few songs that I could pull out. One of them you heard me playing already. But I think some lyrics in this song really gets to what America was feeling like in terms of this culture, this movement. Y'all know that song? So of course you know those lyrics, no blacks, no Jews, and no gays. Which was very forward, right? But I think that shares a sentiment of what Middle America was feeling in terms of what led them to this disco demolition. Like, this, you know, these people are free now. What do we do? They're taking all stuff away. We don't have anything. You know, they really thought in their head that this culture was pushing rock culture out. I don't know why they didn't think that both cultures could exist at the same time. Right? Say it again? Oh, we're not going to get into that conversation because you're going to have them jumping off the bridge. But, yeah. So this next song I want to play came out actually in 1977. This version here was a remix done some years later, like in '84. But the original that came out was a very powerful song at that time in 1977, the year Frankie was here, and the warehouse got jumping. And it was a very strong message to uplift the people in the LGBT community. So can you imagine, though, that hearing that in 1977, coming on the loudspeakers at a club, at a time where it's not known to be proud of this fact, right? And then the fact that that original 12-inch came out on Motown. It was originally released on Motown, and actually was, what I discovered later, was that was actually the second version. The first version was by an artist by the name of Valentino, which was also on Motown 2 years before, and then Motown had a subsidiary that it came out on called Gay Records. Right? Yeah, so it's like, that's interesting that history is never talked about when it came down to Motown. You know what I mean? And then, to make it even heavier, that song is by the Reverend Carl Bean, who is now an archbishop. Right? Yeah, so all of that I find to be kind of like, wow. You know, but I also got to, can feel how walking to this space and having something like that playing, and there's the sound system, which was a Richard Long sound system. Richard Long was a sound engineer from New York, where Robert Williams had his system specifically came into Chicago, that separated the bass and the tweeters and everything, and it gave the room a whole other sound. To come in and hearing that kind of song, the kind of freedom it lent you in that moment. You know what I mean? And then also be in a space where you can actually respond to that and move without worry of being policed, without worry of being, again, black bodies in motion and then without consequence. So to be in a space where you can actually respond and move freely in this dark black box. You know what I mean? I can only imagine how, well, I can imagine because I know from the first times I've ever gone to this type of event, just to have that bass in your system, which is like, oh, it's just like it lifts you up, right? I'm gonna play another song right quick that just kind of play some songs that were kind of anthems, and thinking about how the lyrics of these songs just brought about peace. I think some of y'all know that song. So again, you know, Peace Pipe, it's just songs of upliftment. And you know, like I said, a time where we still are dealing with, even though, you know, we have quote unquote certain freedoms, and even though we are of a people, especially with the black LGBT community, whom we live in a state where they were the first to decriminalize us and stuff like that, but because of the color of our skin, we still can't enjoy the benefits of, not even so much a benefit, I just simply can't be me. I don't need to benefit, I just need to breathe and live. You know what I mean? The one thing that I wanted to mention though, is that there's a train of thought that house music came out of the ashes and rose like the phoenix after the disco demolition, which that's false. Mainly because the movement was already happening well before. And when you look at house parties, I don't know how many of y'all actually really stayed active on the house scene. But a lot of those records that became the chief disco record, you didn't hear them in the house club. You didn't hear YMCA at The warehouse. You know what I mean? There was a certain soul, a certain energy that came from the breaks of disco that made the blueprint for house music. That was not found in the cheesy disco or the disco duck. And Ethel Merman had a disco record. And Rod Stewart, do you think of, and that was a cut. I love Rod Stewart, do you think I'm sexy? But you didn't go to the music box and hear, do you think I'm sexy? So that was also the beauty of this movement, was that it was so underground, but being underground, they had room to play as DJs and research and explore. And I'm thankful as a DJ for it, because house began to, they poured from soul, jazz, funk, rock, and there's so many elements. I have pulled out some records here. Hold on one second, I'm trying to hear. That's what that's for. They began to explore music that was coming out overseas. So many records that we didn't even know what the song was saying, because the songs were saying were being performed in other languages. But the grooves were so dope that we got down. Let me turn it up. What was he saying? Until this day, 40 years later, it's still like, woo! It was crazy is that there's a guy by the name of Tullio D'Episcopo out of Italy. Amazingly, when I first saw the record, Famudu Damouye from the Art Ensemble of Chicago was playing on it. So it's funny how Chicago always will show up in these instances no matter what. But in Frankie's collection, the same I would imagine would have been with Ron Hardy's collection, if you're familiar with Ron Hardy's. There's such a variety of music. For some reason, I don't know why he had like 12 copies of the Dreamgirls soundtrack in there, but okay. And the one thing about it, I'm not going to really be able to get to in this talk, but I'm definitely going to get to in my set if y'all stay around, is that we have to be, y'all staying around? The one thing about Frankie's collection that I love is that Frankie stayed relevant until he passed away. So there's so much good music. Like we always kind of focus on, the 70s, early 80s years, but there's so many good jams that he continued to play from the 90s, 2000, 10, 11, 12 that are all in there that I'm definitely going to get to. Because our music definitely did grow and progress. Of course, you know, he became a Grammy Award winner and started producing and remixing Janet Jackson, Madonna, and Mariah Carey, and some of the biggest names. I think there's a record that's autographed by Janet, isn't it? Janet left a really naughty Miss Jackson is your nasty message on one of Frankie's records. Is it in that display?
It's not in the slides.
Okay.
It's not for public consumption.
Okay. But he had that kind of rapport. And I mean, that was the one thing that I loved about him, is that when I finally met Frankie was very graceful, and he set the standard. He set the standard, especially in business. Because a lot of us that came on the scene, and a lot of those before me, came out of high school. So many of them came from Kenwood and Whitney Young to begin to create this music and do this music, and had no business sense about it. You hear so many stories about so many house music producers and DJs that felt like they got taken and robbed and carried on. And Frankie set the standard of how to conduct business as well, which is something that's very, very important. That I still think that we really still continue to be talking about how to be business minded, and in the course of us feeling free. You know, the best way to feel free is to have our business together. You know? Another song I want to play, just from the standpoint that I'm tripping out that this guy, y'all know the Beach Boys? This guy who made this song was actually a part of the Beach Boys. And we have been partying to it and just didn't know that. One more time. Y'all know that song? So Bruce Johnson was out of the Beach Boys band. So when I found it, I was like, wow, we've been partying to all genres of music under the umbrella of house.
Yes, sir.
Right?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
I would be remiss if I didn't acknowledge somebody in the room who also played a major role in things and played a major role on me in this game, because just as the warehouse was doing this thing and the Powell put these places, cultivating spaces for the LGBT community in this culture, there was another space that started cultivating this culture and started raising up new generations of people in this culture, and that was Minto High School. In case y'all didn't know. And the person who was the one that started those parties and who was responsible for all those parties and all those DJs and all those performers at Mendel that eventually got the support of the Archdiocese and kept the school open is Mr. Kirk Townsend. So there is a lot of history right there, y'all. Because of course you know, again, house music, we're talking about LGBT safe space, but of course you know at some point that freedom extended outside of the LGBT community and then to all of Chicago. And Mendel High School was one of the key places, for this to happen. New generations would not be in this had not been for his work. And he started that in 1975? And that was where he started actually in 1975, so 2 years before Frankie got here. So, thank you, Mr. Townsend. Yeah, he had all kind of test pressing acetates that I really can't play because the grooves wear on them. But I wanted to show y'all, like, this is an acetate of Talking Heads Izimbra. It's like, wow, that's rare history there. This is an acetate of one of his absolute favorite songs, Tell Me You Said I'm Here Again. This was the acetate pressing of it. And then this song, I don't know if this is the, I think I played the B side. I should have played the A side. Okay. I was like, I can't take it off because he is. So we talk about freedom and movement and feeling it.
Oh, yeah.
Yes. Yes, that's what it was. So for so many, that ended up being church. You know, I personally remember feeling that and losing myself and actually don't even remember moments because I seemingly blacked out. Just from being overtaken by some song in the music and taking me, you know, and none other spaces had that freedom, that kind of freedom. And that didn't happen in your average disco. That only happened in house culture because that's what it was built on. You know, it was built by marginalized people who needed space to finally release. You know? And so even just the mention of these songs or just the hearing takes you back to that place. of how you felt when you first heard it. You know, when I was actually going through the records, trying to figure out what I was going to pull and play, Julie was laughing at me because I kept pulling these records. It was like, oh my God, I remember when I first went to this party and they played this, and oh my God, and at the break we doing this, and you know what I mean? Because it's that powerful, and unfortunately, you know, where one daily supported it, another daily by the early 90s helped kill the scene. With, you know, zoning laws and these new things and juice bar ordinances and to make way for this new tourism. The Bulls are now a winning team. Harpo Studios is here. Let's make way for tourism. And a lot of the areas that we occupied that were underground are all the areas you now see that are all gentrified. You know, it was like they followed us. Everywhere we went, we was like this light. I was like, ooh, they're not afraid to go over there. Okay, let's build up something. Ooh, they're not afraid to go over there. Let's build up something. You know, because I mean, the music box, I mean, all that was downtown, but of course, you know, they ended up moving to 2210, which became the Powerhouse, and that was right next to the Ickes projects. They didn't want to be over there. They want to be over there now. So it's now we're in a situation where I did a talk at the House Fest last year called Anatomy of a Group House and Borrowed Spaces, where so much of what we do are in spaces that we have to rent and borrow that don't understand the dynamic of what goes on. I've been to parties where we are in these spaces that are typically a space that they want to do kind of like a bottle service, VIP, pop the collar sort of thing, and something naturally house kicks off, and the security guards begin to police the floor. Again, black bodies and emotions without consequence. So I think that's the reason why we kind of hold on so tightly to the memories that we have in terms of some of those old parties. Because I don't think we felt as free as we did, as we do now. Plus, you know, we older and everybody got kids, grandkids, bills, responsibilities, and different things change. I definitely didn't have too many kids in the world, you know. Trying to be mindful of my time as well, because it's so many ways I can go. I don't know if anyone on the floor have a question or want to bring up anything, because this can go on for a while. Huh? Say it again?
I said, are you doing the experiences, the person who experienced it during that time? Because Ron Hardy and I are the same age. And I started with the warehouse. And it started late in the evening, like 11, 10, 11, until 6 in the morning. And at 6 in the morning, we all go have breakfast at the Golden Nugget or Golden everywhere. We fell out sleep half the day and remember the fun that we had. That was the best weight loss ever.
Listen.
And if you're tired, you fall asleep on one of the old couches, the chairs they had. Nobody bothered you. Nobody touched you. When you woke up, it was round to you.
Because I'm telling you, if I can have the waistline I had when I was 5 man. Because literally, like my mom never understood, because again, because my uncles were DJs, they still came from a different culture. Lounge culture was different. You know what I mean? And even when they do parties, and my grandmother always do parties in the house, and you know, they would have their little dance, and they would do their thing, they would, you know, they went from step in the box to this to everything. They didn't understand the nature of this. Like, y'all actually going somewhere. What happens? Y'all dance from 10 to 6? You know, my mom even said that. I had my birthday party here a few weeks ago, and my mom was here, like, handling food, and she was like, them folks danced from the time they walked in, and they danced till the time it was over, and they were sweating, and I don't care how their clothes looked, they sweated their clothes like, yeah, I'm like, yeah.
this long crowd, we heard this all the music, and I'm like, let's go there. So we got in line, and went upstairs, went downstairs, and we have found our home. Yeah. The party, first of all, you got to take a chance to walk. Until the sun comes up, and then we used to go to the rock. We had a whole lot. And we were there all morning. By the time I got home, they had to drag me in the house. And you could sleep all day. And my little brother said, he remembers me when the house was on fire. I was just running around. Whoa! That building you get, it swim through you.
Yes.
I mean, there's no way to explain it. The building was like a church.
Yeah.
That's what it was. And I like that, and even though, you know, we started out, because it definitely started out with the Black LGBT community that created it, but I love how inclusive it became.
But everybody wasn't there.
And that's what I'm saying. And that's what I mean. Right. That's what I'm saying.
Back then, you could go on the he's worldwide, but you could go on the bigger hub. Back then, before he got revenge.
Yeah, but that's what I mean.
Okay, how we got started was with my sister. We was at the copper box outside.
Copper box? No!
Copper box!
That's just only in the motherfucker!
Who is married?
I said copper box!
And he kept saying, don't go to the club. And that was 30-some years ago.
And so you probably
She
knew.
wanted to go to dance because at the copper box.
My,
And that's how we got introduced. Like she said, you didn't have to be
so one of those uncles I'm talking about DJed at the Copper Box. So you probably knew my uncle and my sister. Yeah. But no, that's what I mean by inclusive, that it started out with the LGBT community, but this thing spread out. And once you got to the door and new people, like, come on. You know what I mean? Think about it. It would never be, House would never be on the world stage if it is now if it wasn't inclusive.
Yes,
You know what I mean? The thing I don't like, though, is that I see so many stories. Even I felt like that when I saw the episode that they did on TV One Ensemble.
Yes!
I do feel like, because of the history, I feel like the LGBT factor of them being the originators has been trying to be wiped out of the story. Which you can't. Yeah, you can't deny that fact that this started out with the Black LGBT community. You cannot wipe that away from how it started. I don't care where it ended up going, how you ended up walking into it. When I first walked into it, I didn't want in a gay club, but I can't deny who was before me.
Plus, everybody danced with everybody.
Yeah, and that's the thing about House is that they didn't come party up.
It didn't have to be a wallflower. Yeah, one picture with, you didn't have to wait for.
Well, first of all, like, I would go to the music box, and then for the most part, you couldn't see. You couldn't see.
How many remember 1313 South Michigan? Before we got into the lower underground.
Yeah.
We used to go in because we got tired of getting shut down. You know, I went to Whitney Young. I was a personal friend of Frank. And still Steve Hurley and quite a few of them, Ron Hardy, everybody that was on that scene.
What's your name?
My name is Keith Perry.
I know you.
Okay, I danced with Joel Hall Dance Company, but we all go back, we were all artists.
Yeah.
And so the one great thing about House for us was that it was a spiritual journey.
Yes.
It wasn't about the drugs, it wasn't about the homosexuality, it wasn't about all the touchy-feely, things. It was releasing your soul. And so when I tell you that it was a spiritual journey, understand it was just that. That's what these babies don't understand today.
How about that?
Okay? House will never die. Because it is tribal, it is spiritual, and it's just innate in the body.
But the thing about it never dying. But of course, House is a global thing. I mean, you look at all of the festivals that happen in Europe, and I look at so many of the DJs that are doing great work that are getting booked overseas, and a chosen few and all these people that are really doing phenomenal work at keeping this culture alive,
Work.
we still need to get ahead of our stories.
Work.
Because believe it or not, there's still a world out there who still don't know that house originated in Chicago.
Work.
Which, how is that possible? You know what I mean? So we really, and that's, I'm glad, thankful for the Ashley Gates and Rebuild Foundation and Julie and everything that goes on here, because this building is all about our stories, our history, and everything else. And yeah, I'm just talking and talking. I gotta be mindful of my time.
Work. Do your thing, sir. Wait, man.
Some of us do understand.
Yeah, but see, you're not a baby. Here's the thing, because like I said before, yes, it started out at these certain places, but it didn't end there. And so house history didn't end when the power plant closed. House history didn't end when the music box closed. House history didn't end when Frankie moved back to New York. Like, it kept going. There's other sororities. There's so many people who played a role in this. Again, there were DJs who were actually doing things before Frankie got here.
Yes.
You know, and like I said with the work of Kirk Townsend, they raised new generations of house people and house culture. That's why in 2020 we're still here. You know what I mean? At some point, you know, house ended up being, it was on the radio every day. You know, so no, don't feel like you're a baby, because trust me, there's generations after you. There's a DJ I know named Ray Chardonnay, and others that named Chrissy. They're only in their 20s. They're only in their 20s, and they know this culture. So you're not a baby. So, anyway, I'm going to strike the set, because we're going to strike the set here and get ready for the dance party. So, I hope this was worth your time. Again, we could have gone a whole nother. Again, a lot of things that I know is from actually being a mentee of so many of the creators. But there's a couple of publications out here that you can definitely check out. One is called Do You Remember House? It's by a writer by the name of Michael Salkind. He interviewed so many of us. I'm in this book. There's another book called Love Saves the Day, and it's by Tim Lawrence. Is another good book to read, and just about the geographical landscape. And then coming soon, Black geographer by the name of April Graham wrote a senior thesis on the Black house kids and house culture from a socio-geographical standpoint that is killer, and it's going to be available for the public consumption soon. So as soon as that happens, I'm going to rebuild and we're going to advertise it. Because again, our stories need to be told. Chicago is still this untapped city with all this rich history that still needs to be unearthed. We know so much more about these major cities. There's so much more that Chicagoans don't even know about Chicago and how it operated, and so many of the legends that came out of here, and so many of the things, and so much of our influence, how we influence the world. And so I'm glad that the city is now dedicating, the year 2020 is the year that the Department of Cultural Affairs and Special Events are dedicating the year 2020 to be the year that we're going to celebrate Chicago music the whole year. So there's going to be a lot of programming centered around Chicago music only for the entire year. So let's get into this pride, y'all. This is where you're from. So again, thank y'all for your time. I hope this was worth your time. And now we're going to start the set and get ready so we can jam.